recording now. So it says it's recording. All right, so let's talk about the agenda items. Okay, all right, we'll switch here. All right, so agenda items, we had 1.8 things to do. We had maybe having a China-friendly meeting time periodically. Were there other agenda items? By the way, Avesh, I investigated your question. I can answer your question. It might be of interest to people here. They asked on Slack, so that'll take like 30 seconds. But anything else people wanted to talk about?
I think that probably covers it for today. There's a bunch. At some point, somebody needs to I don't know how we want to deal with swizzling out or divvying up long-standing action items for the community, right? There's a bunch. We have 300, I think, different issues now that people have gone through and triaged a good chunk of them. That there's 3-4 people on the call. There's no way we can tackle all 300 of those issues. It'd be nice if they were community oriented, such that we could divvy them up to somebody who says, hey, I want to work on this stuff. I think that's a longer term picture where we could start to address that.
So what do you mean by divvy up? Do you mean more triaging, or you mean actually have people implement them? Because it can't possibly be the case that there's 300 or 400 things that we would need to implement. That would be overwhelming. So what do you mean in specifically?
Well, there probably have to be extra labels. Brian doesn't want to use the help wanted label, but some way for us to say, if somebody shows up either on Slack or whatnot, and they have over time, and the China folks could too, be involved in looking at that list of items and being able to take apart pieces of them and be able to execute on them, right?
I see. So it's like a help wanted. It's this effectively like a help figure out which things are help wanted things, but without using that label, using some other.
A not help wanted, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's totally reasonable. I just didn't understand initially what you had in mind. Yes. You have an agenda item?
Yeah. So I was wondering if we have the time to briefly go over that scheduler dynamic configuration thing. I have a PR that is now sort of blocked because people thought that we should apply the configuration dynamically as opposed to restarting the scheduler. So I would like to talk about that.
Okay.
Sure.
I think that's a bad idea for stuff like the scheduler, but we can dive into the details, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have agenda items? No.
I just wanted to point out, I think we are going to talk about 108 items, right? So I know I had signed up for rescheduler previously, but I'm sorry I did not spend enough time. But yeah, definitely for 1.8, I'm going to focus mainly on rescheduler. So just wanted to point it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. We can add that to the list.
Yeah.
That I don't have anywhere to write down. But okay. So maybe we should start. Well, Tim, did you cover the help wanted thing in enough detail, or did you want to talk more about that? I wasn't sure if you were saying that's an agenda item or you were just saying that's something you want to do.
That's not something I want to do.
Yeah, that's not what I meant. If you were just trying to bring it to people's attention, or if they want to talk more about it.
I think it's a PSA, I think, at this point. So.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't mean that you wanted to go through 300 issues. Yeah, I agree. We need to find a way to divide that up. I mean, maybe we could get people to volunteer. I mean, maybe we could send email on the mailing list to see if people are interested. But we need to divide up those issues if in a some kind of deterministic way. So, we don't have multiple people wasting their time examining the same issues. But yeah, divide them up somehow and then figure out which ones are help wanted, and also figure out how we're going to indicate help wanted. Did Brian have a suggestion on how to indicate help wanted if we're not using the help wanted label?
Nope.
No. Okay.
Priority, I guess, is like the simplest that's not very indicative, right?
Yeah, I agree. It seems kind of right. A somewhat separate concern. Okay. Well, I can ask him about that, and maybe one of us should send email to the mailing list once we figure out maybe somebody off the top of their head has an idea of how to like deterministically partition the issues, and assuming we have a list of people who are willing to help triage them, like we could just do like mod, like the issue number mod, whatever the number of people is, and you get those or something. I don't know. I mean, it's hard. Yeah. It's the first thing that comes to mind. All right, well, maybe we should collect, there's only 6 people on the call today, so we should probably solicit help on the mailing list. It would get a broader audience, I think. So one of us should write that email, Tim.
I can write that up.
Okay, great. All right. So should we talk about 1.8 stuff? Avesh said he was going to work on rescheduler. I know Bobby is working on the priority and preemption stuff. And actually, you sent out a design doc on Friday for the preemption stuff, which, did anybody comment on it yet?
Yes.
Okay.
So actually several people have.
Okay, good. I didn't look at it. So, I looked at the doc, but before people comment on it. So, if folks are interested in that, you should take a look. Bobby sent out the doc to Kubernetes dev.
Yeah,
that's right. On Friday.
Yeah. So far, I didn't see any objection about the algorithm or the whole logic or the design in general in any of the comments.
Okay. Yeah. At some point, we should convert it, or by we, I mean you, should convert it to Markdown and make it an official proposal. I find Google Docs easier. Like the first 10 people who comment on the doc, I think Google Docs is easier. Than after a certain point, then it becomes, well, actually that's true of commenting on GitHub too. Like after a certain number of people are commenting, it becomes hard to track what's going on. But anyway, at some point, you should convert it to, you did that with the priority, the original, the first proposal, right?
That one is not merged yet though. So it's still in the review phase.
Okay. So anyway, people who are interested in this should check out the doc Bobby sent. Other 1.8 stuff.
I am going to be working on component config stuff for the scheduler and cleaning up some of those legacy flags. And I'm probably going to have to review the existing flags that are there. So I'll get rid of that AlphaGate stuff that we added a while back in 1.6 or 1.5.
Yeah, that's okay.
And then I'm going to be working towards working with Andy Goldstein. He actually recently joined Heptio.
Oh, really?
Yep. And he did the component config work on the kubelet, or not the kuproxy, sorry. And he's going to, I said a good place for us to start to work on this would also be the scheduler, because we're going to be integrating some of that work into cluster lifecycle too. So
you should definitely loop Bobby in on that, since just because he worked on the scheduler policy config stuff, which is related. Okay, that sounds good. Anything else? I guess we can ask. We should ask on the mailing list. Like I said, there's only 6 people in this chat today, so we may not be getting everything. So I can send email after the meeting soliciting more 1.8 stuff, and we can continue the discussion next week, because I think 1.8 doesn't actually start quite yet. I think it's still a few more weeks. I can't remember. Okay. Bobby, you said you wanted to talk about something, and I've already forgotten.
Yeah, the scheduler config.
Oh, right.
So that work, which was like dynamic reconfiguration of the scheduler, or well, the first one was converting the scheduler config file to config map object. That part is done, and it's already merged, so scheduler can also read its config from a config map.
Right.
The ability to read it from a config file is still there, but we have an additional way of providing the config map. However, the second part, which is applying the changes at the time that the config map changes, applying the changes of the config map basically to the scheduler is not there. So I send a PR to detect the changes to the config map so that the scheduler exits and relies on the fact that kubelet is going to restart it. So as soon as the scheduler restarts, it picks up the new config and basically has the new config. So people didn't like it. I believe there were some concerns about the fact that the scheduler is restarted.
Right.
There were some concerns as saying that scheduler may not restart reliably in certain scenarios or in certain deployments. I guess there were a little bit of a concern in OpenShift maybe.
Do you have details on that issue number? Just so I'm writing notes right now. So if you have an issue number where the concerns were raised,
I can find it.
Was it an issue or a PR?
It's a PR. It's a PR, and
let's see. Oh, you're off the early. Okay. Yeah, you're. Is it the add priority to Kubernetes API?
This one, add policy config map.
44805. Tim, yeah, 44805.
Okay.
So yeah, so there was objections to the restarting. I wonder if we can find something that someone said. It wasn't to the restarting. It was to the exit. Well, I guess there were two objections. One was some people weren't sure if restarting was the right thing to do. The other was some people weren't sure if exiting would on all platforms actually lead to the scheduler restarting. And if that didn't happen, obviously that would be bad. I mean, I like you. I'm surprised that there would be platforms where the scheduler exiting it would not be restarted. But
yeah. So yes, yeah. Exactly. First of all, I was a bit surprised that there could be a system that doesn't react to the fact that one of its critical components is exiting. If there is such a system, I mean, the system would be very unreliable because anyways, the scheduler might crash or any of the other components of the system may crash, and it's not always a deliberate exit. So that said, I also learned recently that kubelet does the same thing. So kubelet has added the dynamic configuration, and it's still in alpha, but kubelet does the same thing. It detects the changes to its config and exits.
Oh, really?
And kubelet relies on systemd or whatever platform it's on, basically whatever operating system it's on to restart it. I think that the situation in scheduler is better because we are not relying on external components. We are just relying on our own component, which is kubelet. And so the concerns about compatibility between platforms and all is not really there. So, I mean, I don't want to say that since kubelet does it, we have to do it as well, but it's something that is a common practice. Looks like it's a common practice in our system. So
it's a common practice in many systems, like because when you mutate state, you're going to have abnormal behavior for a period of time, unless you have like strict blocking and stuff in your data structures. And we clearly don't have that. And I don't really want to build that because it seems like a bug factory.
All right.
Plenty of other systems have precedent for changing the config and doing a hard reboot or recycle because there's high availability on those components, or you ensure that systemd restarts it right away, or some other process watcher is forcing the restart.
Exactly.
The only person that seems to be knacking this is Jordan, and I love Jordan to death because he does a lot of good work. But there's an aspect of distributed systems here where fail fast and restart is I think is totally the right solution for this.
Yeah, especially since we have a lot of caches that rely on the config and they are populated based on what is in the config. If we change the config and want to apply everything and invalidate all these caches and all, and invalidate all the in-memory state based on the new config, it'll be a ton of work, and I would say it's going to be unreliable.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a bug factory.
Yeah, so I think that PR is a reasonable solution for the problem in hand. So that's why I was wondering if it can be revisited.
I'm all for it, because the changes that I want to make too that relate to this stuff, it would be directly benefited from it. So I don't see why. It seems like there's only one detractor. I don't see that, and Jordan has a lot of weight, but I think in this particular case, I think there's plenty of precedent for that. Obviously, the kubelet being one, right? And there's plenty of experience in other systems where they do exactly the same thing too, because the behavior of changing the state and its underlying data structures, unless it's built from the ground up to be completely isolated, you're gonna walk into this weird indeterminate behavior.
Exactly. I totally agree with you on everything. So I would say that this is probably the safest solution to just exit and rely on the kubelet to restart us. So if you can probably reply to that PR, and maybe David, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can also comment.
I think his concern is the cache reloading, right? And believe it or not, but there was a lot of work that we actually did, and there's knobs that are propagated, whether or not people even know that they exist. There are scale back knobs that actually exist in anybody that has a cache to allow you to load slower, right? Because right now it does an aggressive relisting. And there are tools, at least we built it into the controller manager, and we could populate it into the scheduler if we needed to allow you to load that cache less aggressively.
I assume that the scheduler or whatever component it was that's using that doesn't start actually doing real work until that loading is finished. Is that right?
That's correct. There was the controller manager, the one that we did the changes to originally, because it had, before we did the cache reductions, where we had shared caching, it was populating many relists. So every single controller would relist all of the different resource objects in the system. And one of the modifications we made in the 1314 cycle was just to do a scaled loading, so that way if you had a failover of a controller manager for whatever reason, it didn't cause resonant noise in the system with these constant relistings. So I think if we had a controlled initialization that wasn't so aggressive, a similar type of controlled startup, you would alleviate potentially some of Jordan's concerns.
Yeah, but another thing is that Jordan's concern wouldn't completely go away even if we did restart or reapply the configuration without restarting the scheduler, because a lot of these caches have to be invalidated anyways upon configuration changes. So the caches need to be rebuilt. Most of the caches need to be rebuilt anyways. So that concern is still is going to exist even if we apply the configuration. That's one thing. And then second thing is that I believe that change of the configuration or the policy config is a somewhat rare event. It's not something that happens like every hour or every 10 minutes. It's probably something that at most happens once a day, maybe. It's not going to be something very frequent.
Yeah, totally.
Agree.
All right, so Tim and I can comment on this, and hopefully we can get this moving. Unless, I don't know if anybody else on the call has comment on it or not, but anybody else have anything they want to say about it? I guess not. Okay, yeah, but people can comment on the issue if they want to. 44805 was the number. Okay, I I guess we have two things left. One was discussing having a China-friendly meeting time, and the other was 30-second answer to a question Avesh asked on Slack. We could talk about the China-friendly meeting time. So there used to be a long time ago every 2 weeks meeting. It did not last very long, I will say that. But like at midnight Pacific time, on the weeks when we didn't have the regular 2 p.m., now it's 1 p.m. Meeting. And I ran that meeting, and when there were people, at one time there were 3 or 4 people from Huawei who were working on Kubernetes, and some of them would attend, and there was maybe one other person who, I can't remember who would also attend sometimes. But then basically people stopped coming. It was useful for a while, but like the attendance went to approximately 0. And so I actually never made an official announcement about canceling it, but because at first I was just canceling it from week to week because there wasn't anybody who was saying they were going to have a topic to discuss, and then just never got around to officially canceling it. So I asked on the mailing list if there were people from China who were interested in having a China-friendly time because Klaus asked for it. And I believe 4 people responded. Well, what I asked was more specific. It was like people who would actually commit to showing up, because like lots of people are interested in lots of things, and that's not really what we want to know. We want to know, like, would you actually show up? And so 4 people from China said that they would show up. I didn't ask whether people who weren't from China would show up, which is relevant, I guess. And then there's also the question of finding a time to meet. It seemed like an evening time was the best from what Klaus was saying, because China is 9 hours. I mean, it's the easiest way to think of it is it's like 9 hours from Pacific time and 12 hours from East Coast time. But I don't know if the question is, would anybody here actually come to the meeting if we did this? Or maybe we can have a rotation where, I don't know, we have at least me or Tim or Bobby or something like goes to this meeting, or other people who want to like we could have a rotation where we have volunteers from the non-China meeting to go and attend that meeting and talk about what we were talking about at the non-China meeting, and bring back any issues to the other meeting. I mean, I don't know. Did people have any suggestions about how to approach this?
If we are recording this meeting, it's not hard for them to replay.
Well, right. I mean, the issue I think was if they had stuff they wanted to talk about. Definitely recording this meeting is helpful for people who are in time zones for which this is inconvenient. But there was still interest they expressed interest, at least Klaus did, and these other people said they would come in having an actual live meeting that was at a time zone that was better for China. So I don't know. I mean, the times that Klaus was suggesting, I think, were like 6, 7, or 8 Eastern time, was what he had in his email. Would people here show up? Like, maybe every 2 weeks is too often, but we could do it like every 4 weeks or something. That way, maybe it would be more likely that people would come. I don't know. Thoughts?
So is there 4? You said a lot, and I'm being honest, I lost some of it. So is there 4 people that said they would show up to a China-friendly meeting? Is that the
4?
number?
Yes, 4 people from China said that they would show up to a China-friendly meeting time. I did not ask how many people not from China would show up.
I think once you get to the Eastern time zone, it starts to get a little rough around 7-ish. People are dealing with their family and stuff like that. So,
yeah, I mean the like right. The other possibility is to do it later, I guess. Like, if we did like 8 p.m. Pacific time, like that would be like 11 p.m. In the East Coast. Like, so maybe, I don't know if later is better for people.
For me personally, if I wanted to attend a once a month meeting, that is actually better because I put my kids to sleep and then I can come back, and I do that anyways. So
I guess the problem with 11, like something like 11 p.m. and that's very close to the time we used to do it. We used to do it at midnight Pacific time, but the problem is like then obviously nobody from the East Coast is going to show up, right? That would be like 2 a.m.
I think I agree with Tim. Even I mean, in my case, even I would prefer something later, like after 8 or 9 EST.
Abesh, where are you? I forgot where you're located.
EST. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Right, but you don't want like 2 a.m., right?
No, not 2 a.m. I mean, I'm saying like maybe after 8 or 9 p.m. EST, like maybe 9 p.m.
What time zone are you in?
EST.
No, Tim.
Oh, Central. One back.
Okay. Yeah, for some reason I was thinking you were West Coast because you're looking at Heptio now. So something like you guys are saying like 8 or 9 p.m. or no, sorry, you were saying later. You were saying like 11 or what?
I mean, yeah, I think I would say like in my case like 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. EST would be better than like 6 or 7 p.m. EST.
Yeah,
so go ahead.
10 p.m. is 9 p.m. CST, so that would work for me. If we wanted to do it once a month, that's reasonable to me.
Yeah, same here.
Okay. So that would be like 7. That would be like 7 p.m. Pacific time. How about 8? Just so we have an idea of what the ranges are. Like, how about 8 p.m. Pacific time? Is that too late for you guys?
That would still work for me, but it'd be cutting it close.
Yeah, I mean, I once in a month. I mean, I can definitely try. Yeah, 11 p.m. for. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like 7 p.m. with a somewhat distant second choice of 8 p.m. is what people are saying.
They're going home, but it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. That's why I was saying 8 p.m. might be better because like 7 p.m. for people who are commuting in the Bay Area, like 7 p.m. might be too early. So that was the reason why I was asking about 8 p.m.
I can probably manage it somehow. I'm going home a little bit earlier, taking home or staying here.
Yeah, you can definitely.
Later. Yeah.
These are not things that you have to be in an office to do. Any other people have feedback on a monthly like evening time?
Or I was thinking, what about some early morning meetings? I don't know whether people would prefer that.
I don't.
Yeah, Bobby says he doesn't. I definitely don't. But I mean, early morning, like 9 a.m. Pacific time is midnight in China. So like even to try to do a reasonable time in China, like 10 p.m. That's like 7 a.m. Pacific for I think people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to do. I mean, Europe and China, you can do those together. It's just hard to do that with the U.S. And we did occasionally get someone from Europe. Very rarely came to that other meeting time because it was 9 a.m. in Europe. Anyway, whatever. Any other comments about it? All right, so why don't we send it out? I can send out something to the mailing list and mention like the favored time was 7 p.m. Pacific time. There was some feeling that 8 p.m. might also be possible and see if other people have feedback. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I recorded it in the meeting notes too.
Okay, thanks. Okay, and then the last, I mean, people can still add agenda items if they want. So Avesh asked on Slack about why the node selector uses a label selector syntax that includes greater than and less than, whereas the pod selector and all of the other labels times all the other situations where we use label selectors does not include greater than or less than. Sorry, let me restate that a little more clearly. So node affinity has a label selector in it, and the label selector syntax there allows greater than or less than. This is a different label selector syntax than is used for the label selector used in pod affinity and anti-affinity and all the other scenarios where we have label selectors. And so the question is, why is the node selector one different? The answer is, so Brian and I discussed this back when node affinity was being designed. So my original proposal was that we should add greater than or less than to the generic label selector syntax and then use it everywhere. So Brian's argument was that for situations that are selecting pods, it's more important to have a simpler syntax, i.e. not change the one that we already had. So he had two arguments, and I talked to him again about it today just to review this, because I had forgotten some of what the argument was. So one of them was understandability. So the argument was, like, people are going to be writing label selectors in pod affinity and anti-affinity and in the other scenarios where we use label selectors. Whereas node selectors potentially might be automatically generated, like by an admission controller or something like that. Whether that actually turns out to be how they're used, I mean, certainly the pod selector ones are written by humans. I suspect the node selector ones are all. The node affinity is also written by humans. But anyway, one argument was that it's easier to understand the more limited syntax, without the greater than or less than. So for people who don't remember, like, the more limited syntax, the regular label selector syntax is in, not in, present, and absent. It's just those four things. And then for node affinity, we add to that greater than or less than. So there was some argument about understandability of not necessarily like just reading it and understanding it, but of being able to reason about what objects it would apply to, given like, you know, a human's understanding of what labels are on what objects, like being able to easily reason about what the impact of the selector would be. It's easier without greater than or less than, and so that was one argument. And then the other one was that it's kind of related to that, but that it would be more efficient for automated systems that are trying to enforce policy rules about which objects are being selected. It would be more efficient to implement those rules if you didn't have less than or greater than. Like, so for example, if you want to have a rule about no overlapping selectors, or like how many pods should be covered by a monitoring rule, or something like that. So these are kind of vague reasons, I realize, but that was the idea. It was human understandability, and also kind of like the efficiency of implementing policies that about which objects would be selected. And so Brian's original position was that we shouldn't extend the syntax at all. I made an argument that there are a lot of situations where greater than or less than is useful for node selection. I mean, based on some of our experience at Google and so on, like, it seemed at the time like we should have that in the syntax, although it was not, I mean, this was a fairly early decision. It was not driven by like tons of customer input or anything like that, because there weren't a lot of people using Kubernetes yet at that time. But sort of the intuition was that having a more flexible syntax for node selector would be useful in the future. And so that's kind of the hand-wavy explanation of why they're different. And then Avesh, you had also asked why the type itself was separate instead of like the node selector, label selector type being an extension of the generic label selector type. And I don't really have an answer for that, but I mean, I don't know that there's a big benefit of, you know, I mean, first of all, I'm not sure exactly what it would mean for one to be an extension of the other. And also, like, I don't know that it would be a big benefit to have it be, you know, written that way. I will say that the node selector, the logic for matching node selectors, it's the same logic as for matching label select, like all the other label selectors. In fact, like the way that the label selector matching syntax works is that it just, if you're not a node selector, then it gives you an error if you try to use less than or greater than. And if you are a node selector, it lets you use all of them. So the underlying matching code is identical for the node selectors and all of the other label selectors, but the type itself in the API file, in particular the type for the comparison operator, whether it's the 4 types or the 6 types, is a different type. But I'm not sure that matters. Avesh, do you want to say what, you know, like what
yeah, I mean, so thanks for explanation. Yeah, actually my the second question, I was not specifically asking like extending or having node selector, node label selector, extension of label selector. I think I was just saying, like, why we did not extend existing label selector and added more operators like greater than and less than.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Why we? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the first thing I was explaining.
Yeah, exactly. So I understand that. So my next question is, so it seems as you explained, so pod affinity and anti affinity are working as expected. But as I also pointed out, like in the document, like we have mentioned that pod affinity and anti affinity should work with greater than and less than. So do you think just updating then would be good?
Yeah, that's just wrong. Yeah, I saw. Thanks for noticing that. That comment was wrong.
Okay. So maybe like I just create an issue, like we could just update that. And actually the thing that how it started, like our QE, like we found our QE found an issue because they were testing, and that's how like it started. So I mean now like I have explanation from you, so I can at least say like it's working as expected.
Yeah, we should just update the documentation about that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem. Anything else? I mean, if people wanted to ask about the incoherent babbling that you just heard from me, or have other things they want to talk about.
There's one blocking item for 1.7. I know, Bobby, I believe David assigned it to you. It's issue number 47381. Maru had poked me, yeah.
Oh, the test. Yeah, so we determined that it's not a blocking. Actually, I tried to reproduce the test in my own local setup. I left it running for a while. I couldn't reproduce. So my overall assessment was that this is probably not a blocker. I don't see this being a major issue. But we need to fix the flakiness. I don't think we really need to fix it in 1.7.
Okay, I will update the issue then and notify Maru.
Okay. Anything else folks want to talk about? Going once, going twice.
So I have a question regarding the daemon set controller.
Yes.
So Klaus has prepared a document that he wants us to review. So he has proposed like 3 solutions that he thinks that are going to work. So I'm going to put them in the agenda items here. So if someone can review, that would be like really great.
Okay. Yeah, I think, did he also send it out to the mailing list?
I don't think so, but
Can you send it again?
Sure.
Just so people
Sure.
can see it.
Yeah.
This is yeah, that'd be great if you can send it to the mailing list, even if it's already been sent out to the mailing list, and remind people.
Yeah. That's it. Thank you.
This is, by the way, I don't know if you said like the full, Bobby pulled up what it was. This is like using the regular default scheduler to schedule daemon sets.
Right.
Instead of having daemon set controller schedule them, which is something that we would like to do, but is not trivial given all of the weird special casing that the daemon set controller does today. I mean, it requires thinking about which of the behavior we want to keep. Perhaps all of it we need to for backward compatibility, and
Haas has gone through that.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So
I've seen this doc.
Okay. Yeah. So we should take a look at that.
Yeah.
It's a worthy thing to do for sure, but not simple. I mean, I think it's kind of like once we decide what to do, it's maybe relatively simple to implement, but figuring out what the right thing to do is not simple.
People are what's kind of a little weird that we need to be careful about once we do eventually subsume daemon set behavior or scheduling, is that people are kind of relying on the current behavior of daemon sets to be able to schedule to things even though they're not quote unquote schedulable, right? And that's part of the cluster lifecycle stuff. So long as we loop those folks in during whatever transition period folks want to make.
And it's related, I completely agree, and it's related to this bigger issue of trying to replace some of the logic that uses node conditions with logic that uses taints instead, and having the node controller set taints corresponding to the node conditions and stuff like that. And Marek was going to work on that at some point relatively soon. But yeah, all of these pieces are related, and like you said, they're related to cluster lifecycle. This is one of the reasons why it's tough this is why it's complicated, because like you said, the people are relying on the current strange behavior. I mean, I think we can probably, with proper use of taints and tolerations, like reproduce the behavior that we want using the regular scheduler, but it requires someone working through the details.
Yeah, there's a part of me that still cringes at this stage of the game that we haven't formalized our state machine structure for some stuff, because we don't have formal sets of edges and well-defined states for all the different conditions that exist and how to get out of them. Because right now the node has not ready. and even though there's like a bunch of conditions that can lead you into not ready, and that's part of the problem that we're talking about with taints.
Yeah, and then another thing that I noticed, given this problem and somewhat similar problem that we've seen, for example, for spreading various types of stateful sets and replica sets and all, I had to add stateful set to spreading at some point, and I had to go and change a lot of functions, sort of like trivially, to add stateful sets to the logic. So I was wondering if we could add something like a controller for various types of, not a controller is probably not a good word, maybe it's sort of like a state machine or a separate module inside scheduler for various types of these, what do we call it, by the way? I don't know. Well, like a stateful set is considered like a
controller. I mean, they're called controllers.
All right. Yeah, for various types of these controllers. So, for example, daemon set, we have, if there is a special scheduling logic, it goes into its own module inside the scheduler, or for various other controllers, we have other modules inside the scheduler, so that, for example, they may have state machines for themselves, or...
Well, I mean, I think we should be careful not to make it too complicated, but yes, if there's different rules about how the different controllers are handled by the scheduler, then having a way to configure that, like have it at a single place to write those rules. It seems like it's useful. Like if we should always spread, like the example you gave, like we should always spread pods from the same controller, having an easy, like having an array or somewhere that we list the controller types, and then you just add that one time each time you add a new type of controller or something.
Yeah,
would be simple. I don't know like how complicated we should try to make this, but
so scheduler can have a default behavior for everything. So for example, if I don't know, stateful set does not make any customization to this whole logic, it just uses whatever scheduler does. And if there is some special logic, it could go and register itself with the scheduler, so that the scheduler calls its functions when it's making scheduling decisions, something of that sort.
Yes, I mean we could right.
And then the same thing could probably work for daemons.
There may be, yeah.
Because right now we have to just go and special case everything inside the scheduler.
I mean, this seems like something that might be beyond just the scheduler, like might be useful in general, like some registry for the different controllers and what the like special case properties of them are. So you just have one place that you look at and change if you're adding a new controller or something like that.
Exactly.
I mean, another thing we can try to do is make the scheduler less reliant on the controller type. Like, I mean, I was just thinking, like, for example, the spreading, we could get rid of the spreading priority function and just have the controllers add preferred anti-affinity to all of the pods that they create or something like that. And so, like, obviously the scheduler would be easier to understand if we didn't have special cases for the different controllers, probably. So I don't know. Yes, this seems like a worthy kind of thing to look at. I don't know if anybody has time to, but.
Yeah, well, I can try if I find some time.
Okay. Yeah. Seems like, yeah, that kind of clean.
Or maybe
simplification would be useful.
Klaus, since he's working on the daemon set,
maybe
we can
do it as part of that.
Yeah,
sure.
At least part of the work as part of bringing daemon set to the schedule.
Right. Okay. Anything else people want to talk about? All right. I guess we are done. See everyone in 2 weeks.